Hello and welcome to another episode of Build Series Sydney. Joining me today, I have some very special guests. Australian rock royalty, Rob Hirst from Midnight Oil, and country music powerhouse, Jay O'Shea. How are you guys? Are you well?
Great, really great.
Great, thanks,
Thank you.
It's so good having you here, particularly today, because today is new single release day.
It is, finally.
Finally.
Today is the day. Woohoo!
Of course, Pearl Shell Buttons. How does it feel to finally have some tunes out there for the people to consume?
Well, that's a tune.
Yes. Oh, well, the album is coming out.
It is
first,
coming. It's coming out next week, 28th of February, I believe. It's really exciting, actually. I was a little nervous at the beginning of the week, because literally nobody had heard it. So now we're at the end of this lovely run of press in Sydney, and a few people have heard it, and I think they like it. So I think I'm off the hook of the fear of everybody hating it.
Mm.
No, I think people do like it, but it's a weird thing because people of a certain age will actually remember where that kind of goth pop thing comes from.
Mm.
When I was growing up, I really loved people like Bobby Gentry. Ode to Billy Joe is the obvious song. Jeannie C. Riley, people like that. You know these?
Of course I know these people.
You do.
Yeah.
Do you know all these? Yeah. It was just like a mid-'60s thing which came and then disappeared.
Yeah.
It was a kind of dark gothic storytelling, usually from southern states of America.
Yeah.
Pretty much where Jay lives.
Mm.
And the song was written really quickly with that kind of idea in mind. It's a fictional story.
Sure.
But it's got the same instrumentation, lots of strings,
Mm.
which were arranged and recorded by Daniel Denham, who does a lot of the best string arrangements, I think, in Sydney.
Wow, fantastic.
Amazing. He's incredible.
My first impression was just that swagger of a beat. Straight away I thought of riding into a one-horse town on a horse, and
Very
just
Nashville
trouble
hipster. Yep.
was about to brew.
Exactly.
You know?
People have mentioned Tarantino, so I called him immediately and he said, yep, next film.
Yep.
It's in.
Of course. That's
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
It has to be.
Yeah, it's quite cinematic,
Yeah.
I think, in that way. And for those that were, brought up on westerns, and it's got that, it does have that one horse into a town full of shutters, and you just know that something bad is going to happen any minute.
Oh, yeah. Clint Eastwood was involved in the writing of this track as well, I heard.
Yeah, so I spoke to Clint
was.
first,
Yes.
and
straight
then
off.
then Tarantino.
Then Tarantino afterwards. And of course, 28th of February, an album of music, and it's interesting because you definitely live in different parts of the world. How does it come together? How does an album of 11 tracks come together when you're sending each other's songs? Was it difficult? Was it challenging?
No, it wasn't difficult, but it was a different process, I think, for both of us, really, because we started writing together. Like, we'd get together, a couple of times a year and get the families together and whatever. And we're too busy sort of carrying on having a good time, really, to sit down and seriously write a song, But over the years, we've just swapped choruses and verses, and which led to Rob coming over and actually doing some writing in Nashville. And then I went to Byron and we did a week together, just, chipping away and really trying to write some songs. And then after that, we sort of ended up with a handful of songs. We thought, how about we just start recording and see what happens? So Rob came over for a week in Nashville, and we went into the studio, and he recorded some fantastic drums, and we recorded cello at that point, a bunch of vocals together. And then we sent files backwards and forwards across the pond to Brent Clark, who co-produced with Rob, and he sort of pulled things together. And my producer in Nashville, David Axelrod, pulled my vocals together and shot them down to Australia. So, and then we would wake up, and it was exciting because I'd see, there's some new files in. I'll see what they've done overnight while I've been sleeping, and vice versa. And we check it out. Oh, wow, there's a new cool string arrangement on this song. That's amazing, Or I'm not sure about that. How about we get rid of that and we try something else? So it was a different process, and we really took our time with it. I think that was the luxury that we had.
Fantastic. Now, I'm not going to let you get away with calling me an East Nashville hipster. I
It's
heard
a compliment.
I heard you say that.
It's such a compliment, right? It really is.
I hope so.
It is. It totally is.
But this album, of course, I guess, has a lot of that Nashville flavor in it. And music and Nashville go hand in hand. Can you tell me what kind of benefits came from writing, recording, and making music in Nashville that you wouldn't have gotten in Australia?
Well, actually, Jay does her parts in Nashville, but I work in Jim Magini from Midnight Oil Studio, mainly in the Northern Beaches here in Sydney. And so I've worked with Brent Clark for years. He's worked with Midnight Oil, obviously, and a whole lot of people. He's got a great bedside manner.
Sure.
He extracts whatever talent I have out of me and in the nicest possible way. And we didn't have any time restrictions, as Jay said. So as ideas came, the EP that we'd planned gradually turned into an album. But then we also realised that it wasn't an album with a kind of focus. It was an album of 10 discrete different songs. You know, I mean, I've always believed that you serve the song first rather than go for the big picture, and the big picture will become obvious later on. And we love using more acoustic instruments rather than electronica. It's partly from my background. I would prefer the sound of a real cello to, a keyboard cello any day, and real strings.
And you're a drummer, of course.
And that drum room, actually, at Jim's studio, is sensational for drums. It's a high-ceiling, old wooden room full of recycled timber, and anything you hit or say or do or strum in that room is fantastic. And Jim's got a Steinway in there as well, which appears on the opening track, Shouting at the Sky. So, a lot of the album actually was done in Sydney.
Okay.
At both Oceanic Studio, Jim's studio, and a studio called Point Blank in Drummoyne, but also, Jay did obviously all her parts in the famous Benchmark Sound Studios in Nashville.
Incredible. I mean, the first kind of music flavour we heard from you, The Truth Walks Slowly, which I actually have a bone to pick with you guys. I saw the music clip and it made me cry in public. That was absolutely cruel. But the song was breathtaking. In fact, it won you a golden guitar, which is fantastic. When that was such a huge success, and that first music creation together, was that when it kind of clicked and you thought, well, we definitely should be doing more of this?
It wasn't really after that, actually. We just sort of, Rob got busy. He's been doing a bunch of recordings for that little band that he works with.
Which one's that again? I forgot.
Yeah,
some band.
Yeah, and I've got O'Shea, so I sort of continued on with that. I guess we thought we should at some point, when we're free, when we have the time, we should collaborate together and do that. But we also didn't really want to force it, I think. We've known each other now for 10 years. And so I'm glad that we've had that time and that water under the bridge to be completely comfortable with each other and relaxed enough to be able to create music together.
Of course. I mean, admittedly, I did ring a mate of yours prior to you guys coming in.
He's done a lot of research.
That were Tim Daly from the Country Music Channel.
Yes.
And I asked,
dear friend,
I asked him about you guys, and he said that an integral part which makes your music so special is, of course, looking at your history, and how 10 years ago, I guess you were somewhat strangers. So. How did that all happen? When did you guys first meet?
We first met in Bronte Beach, actually, but it was 10 years ago. It's sort of a crazy story. I don't know whether I should dive into that story or whether we even have time for it. We've got 3 hours on this show.
I mean, it's all, floor is yours if you'd like.
Well, basically, I was an adopted child. I grew up with a fantastic mum and dad in Adelaide with 2 older brothers, and had a wonderful, loving, great, normal childhood. And I didn't really go searching for birth parents until I was about 19, early 20s, when all of a sudden I sort of started feeling this dark cloud above me and this hole, this void that wouldn't be filled. And so I started looking, and I found my records, and I worked out quickly after cross-referencing them with births, deaths, and marriages that they were fabricated, as a lot of records were back in those days. And so I hit a brick wall, and I had to just put it to bed and just get on with my life and accept that I was probably never, ever going to find my birth parents. So I did that and moved to London and then LA and then Nashville and got on with my life. And then I got this call, actually an email at 3 a.m. in Nashville one night, and I sleep like a baby. So it's strange that I happened to wake up this night, but I picked up my phone and I saw this email, and it had said, it's Family Community Services from Adelaide, and your birth mother has made contact. How would you like me to proceed? And I just sort of sat up in bed and started bawling my eyes out, and I just knew it was real. I knew that I was about to find out all of my information and all the fear and trepidation that comes with that. Like, as an adopted child, I'm sure anybody who's adopted out there will understand this, but you go through so many different scenarios your whole life of how you might have come to be on the planet. And there's a lot of like really nasty scenarios, and I was pretty fearful of that. But anyway, within a couple of days, I received probably a 10-page email from my birth mother. She told me that she's in fact an opera singer. An incredible opera singer at that, and that sort of blew my mind. And then the guy from Family Community Services said, I sent me an email and said, look, I promised your mother that I wouldn't tell you who your birth father was, but I will tell you it's been pretty strange watching him on the telly performing and watching your YouTube performances at the same time.
Wow.
So I just kind of went into a tailspin thinking, my husband Mark and I, we're checking the ages and checking who it could be, who's still current in the music business and who would be on telly like now. And we just thought it's got to be Jimmy Barnes, of course. Or John Farnham, right?
Oh, gosh.
And the funny thing is that actually David Campbell and I are friends and we grew up together.
Yeah.
And I think we pashed in a High School Musical once. So I was like, oh, great. We're brother and sister. So So anyway, we had about 24 hours of torture, pure torture, like trying to figure out who this person might be. And then the next day she sent me this beautiful email and detailing that it was in fact Rob. And the craziest situation of all is that in Nashville, we were friends and still are friends with Bones Hillman, who is the bass player of Midnight Oil. And he was due to come over. Yeah. How crazy is that, right? So he and his wife would come over for game night. We'd have a few wines and play, Cards Against Humanity or whatever, stupid game we could pull up. And he was due to come over. And we were like, how on earth are we going to tell Bones that his best friend of 20 years is my birth father? Like, that's just like The Bold and the Beautiful. It reads like Mossimo's your father kind of stuff, if anyone even knows what that reference is. Anyway, so Rob didn't actually have a chance to talk to Bones over the weekend, and so they show up and they don't know. They haven't been told what's happening, and I'm saying to him, did Rob Hirst call you over the weekend by any chance? And he's like, no, why? What's the deal? Are you guys going to be doing some writing together or something? Like, what? That's cool. And we're like, okay, everybody needs to sit down. Let's all sit down and we'll pour a drink because we have some news that we need to tell you. And told the story. We're all crying. We're all in tears, just going, this is the most insane story. And right then, Bones's phone rings. And keep in mind, we'd never spoken before this time. We hadn't even really emailed much backwards and forwards. Picked up the phone and he's like, Rob, hi. And so I'm sitting there across the table from Bones with my birth father after 30-something years on the end of this phone. And he said, would you like me to introduce you to your daughter? And he handed over the phone.
And a gasp from the crowd. That's incredible.
Yeah, true story. And
gasp from me too.
Yeah, gosh. Listening to that story, I mean, how does that make you feel? I mean, I've heard
that story a few times this week, and it really breaks me up every time I hear it.
Yeah.
Because it's just a couple of things. First of all, it is an extraordinary series of great happenstance moments with a great outcome.
Of course.
As Jay intimated, some folks' reunions are tragic. People don't want to know, and it really wrecks their lives and wrecks the families around them. Because of their misery. But in our case, that hasn't been the case. The families have all been incredibly accommodating,
very supportive.
And
of all of it.
we gradually got to know each other. I sent Jay lots and lots of unsolicited stories about my sordid past, and to fill her, hey, this is what I've been doing for the last 36 years, and And gradually through that, we got to know each other's histories. And then, as you said, we finally got to make this song together, which is dedicated to the Queensland farmer, George Bender, who fought the good fight against the terrible coal seam gas mining up on the Darling Downs, which has wrecked the lives of all those farmers up there.
Incredible. Well, I'd definitely like to talk about that. I think it's funny that you got the update of his entire life. You didn't have to read the book like the rest of us.
I did actually read the book too.
Did you?
Yeah. But then I sort of went, I remember I picked it up and I sort of went, I don't really want to read the book because I don't really want to know this version. I want to know who my birth father is.
Oh, is there a real version? Is that the
Well,
smoke
there
and
is.
mirrors?
You know,
I'm sure that.
you know what it's like by the time the publisher, the editor, the sub-editor and the copy editor all have a go at your story, it's somewhat changed.
Yeah. I mean, as Chopper Reed says, never let the truth get in the way of a good yarn.
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about protest. Because I think that as an Australian young man, I looked to Midnight Oil as a flame of protest. And I think that many people of all different generations did look to that group as like a symbol. And when Midnight Oil took the bench and did other things, it seemed like there was a small gap, but there were bands that were still holding the torch. I'd like to know who you thought those bands were.
Well, of course, in Australia, John Butler, he's been incredible. We've done some shows. We've done quite a few shows with John. We did show at the Domain at the end of our 2017 kind of reunion world tour. We played with John there. Last year we were in Europe. We played another show with John.
Yep.
So, and he's been consistent and remarkable and great. He's like his whole being resonates with cleaning up this country, trying to save the Darling River, trying to stop the bleaching of the reef, trying to, put the damn fires out in the east coast of Australia. And why is this happening? And why is the government doing nothing and holding pieces of coal in the time when renewables are cheaper and, it's staring us in the face? So there's an anger about the man as well, which we can really relate to. But there are others as well. There's some of the old guard. When I talk about the old guard, I mean folks that were around in the late 70s and early 80s when Midnight Oil was starting.
The Farm?
That was even earlier, The Farm, yeah. But people like Shane Howard, has been very consistent out there. You've got to remember all the Koori bands as well. I mean, they are by nature protest bands. I've played, fortunately, with Coloured Stone, and we toured with the Warumpi band all those years ago on that tour. So I've got to know a lot of them, and I won't give away what's happened leading up to Christmas last year, but there is more association with First Nations people with future stuff from that band as well.
Oh, incredible.
Very strongly. Because the other thing, of course, is been this complete neglect of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, first of all by Turnbull and now by Morrison. They will find it too hard. But that should be enshrined in the Constitution, including the Makarrata, which was written by the Yolngu people and stuck right in the middle. And on the European tour last year, we blew that whole statement up and we used that as a backdrop for all those festivals we play in Europe.
Do you think that the arts is learning? Do you think that musicians, artists, do you think that we are all growing and slowly taking in those issues into account? The way we introduce our shows on stadium by paying respects to
artists have always done that. Artists see that as their responsibility. Artists, musicians, authors, playwrights, poets, everyone in that immediately kind of sees through all the spin and goes right to the heart of it. And in their particular art form, they give it up, But why should it always be just the art community? It shouldn't be. It should be led from the top by. We should have what the Japanese would call national treasures. We should have national treasures in the country that everyone sits to attention and listens to. Whether it's climate change experts like Professor Garneau or whoever. But these people, scientists have actually, the whole idea of being a scientist in this country is virtually belittled. In fact, there wasn't a science minister. The coalition didn't even have a science minister for many years. So, the very people that actually knew and told us about these fires 20 years ago, if not earlier, while Abbott and Gillard and everyone from both sides of politics just mucked around and talked about what they were going to do and did nothing, I mean, folks, we knew this was coming,
Yeah.
and there's some songs from our album as well, which talk about that very thing.
Brilliant. Now I want to get just one sentence because I'm pretty sure I know what you're going to say. What are your thoughts on climate change deniers? One sentence.
Have a look at the Great Barrier Reef. That is proof.
Rob? Or if you could say something to them if they're all listening to you.
Well, what I'd say to the climate change deniers is that unless you've actually spent your life studying this issue in the way that the experts have, in the way that 99% of the climate scientists around the world now agree on what's happening, and even if you didn't agree, just have a look. Just look at the melting ice, the drying rivers, the fires, the reef, everything else that's happening around us. You would have to be a complete ignorant prick to continue down that track.
Yeah. Man, that protest, hanging in there, still strong. The flame is bright.
Oh, we are the angry old men of Australian rock.
Yeah.
Hang on, but what do you
Don't
really
disappoint.
think?
Hard to live with.
Yeah. You mentioned John Butler Trio, and I know this is, they're quite random. This just came to mind. He was talking to me about you, and he was saying that it was a concert in 1997 where you played a 20-minute drum solo. Can you fact check me here? He said that the power went out and that you did a 20-minute long drum solo, and when the power came back on and everyone's instruments and the amplification turned up, everyone picked up the song exactly where they left off.
So was that in Broome?
Yes.
And was it called Stomping Grounds?
Stomping Grounds.
Right, yeah,
yes.
that's true, actually.
It's a true story.
Yeah, I mean, the power's always been pretty dodgy up there. Cyclones come through and they take everything out, they still do. It just did last week.
Yeah.
I've forgotten all about that, yeah. And then I actually had the great fortune of actually playing with John on another benefit we did when we were trying. I don't know if you remember, but they're crazy idea, but there were fossil fuel companies trying to build a giant tunnel from the Browse Basin, which is where all the oil and the gas is off the northwest shelf, and they're trying to bring it in, and they were going to build a giant gas plant, only about an hour's drive north of Broome, on a sacred bit of land. And of course, John is Western Australian. He was the first in there, and in fact, he knows and loves that country best of all. And then we got involved. There was a fellow, one of the local mob, that fought tooth and nail. His name was Joseph Rowe. Sadly, he's passed, but he was very instrumental in slowing down, stopping, taking those oil companies and gas companies through the court, slowing the whole process until, and this is what we've found over the years with other causes or events that we've been involved with, is even if you delay, circumstances change. I mean, I could talk about Adani but what actually happens is eventually the people financing, the banks, the finance companies, they pull out because it's too bad to their name. And in the case of that Western Australian gas plant, what actually happened was they found a better way of getting the damn gas out of the ocean. Rather than bringing it with these tunnels and building a gas plant on the coast, they have this massive barge which pulls up directly over the plant, and then they sink. So you don't need to disrupt the humpback whales going back and forth. You don't need to destroy the dreaming of the people on the coast. You don't need to turn a beautiful town like Broome into another fucking mining town like Pilbara. So, if there's one, I feel like the old man of rock here preaching from the pulpit. The one thing I have learned, whether it be things we've been involved with, like keeping the Navy, and Pete was very involved with this, keeping the Navy out of beautiful Jervis Bay down there and the south coast, and working, in the Tasmania with the pulp mill and whatever, whole lots of things we've been involved with, is that you're not going to win it overnight, and the forces of evil are going to be against you. So what you do is you delay, and then the great wheeling of the heavens and the forces of time will win for you.
That is some good advice. Yeah. So keep at it. Be a disruptor. Make it happen. Now, I do want to take things back to music. I want to talk about live performances.
Sure.
I mean, have you guys had a chance to really play the new music from The Lost, the Found?
Yes, on Radio National.
Okay.
And Drive Time ABC. And
okay.
Yeah.
But what about to the stages? Because one of my musician friends says that sometimes you'll perform a piece of music in a studio, record a piece of music, and then you only truly find out what it really means and how it really is supposed to sound when you perform it live. And I was curious whether you've had a chance to do that with the new music in front of a crowd, with people.
We haven't yet, but we were actually just chatting about it before in a previous interview that Rob's got a massive year ahead with the little band that he works with, and I'm releasing the 5th O'Shea record on Sony with my husband Mark this year as well, and so maybe next year when the smoke clears a little bit, we might actually venture out and do some shows and see how that feels, because I know what you mean. I really love to play to a live audience. Obviously Rob does too, and it is a different experience altogether. I like looking into a crowd and seeing people's eyes and seeing if people are feeling it, and or they're like, looking at their watches and they're, scratching their heads. And we both very much come from the live music thing. Like when you were starting out in bands and everything, in your bands, you were a garage band. You started in the garage. I started out in cover bands in Adelaide, and which I'm grateful for that apprenticeship. I'm grateful that I did a gazillion shitty gigs. I think these days sometimes there aren't those kinds of opportunities for young performers to get out there and really hone their craft.
Unless you live in Nashville,
unless you live in Nashville, where you're actually thrashed, beaten by a stick to get out and play live.
Thrashville.
Yeah, that's what they call it. Is that the first time you've said that?
That's very good. He's so quick, isn't he? He's very quick.
I thought you had that one in your back pocket. I thought you were like, yeah. So Adelaide is, I guess there's a few different venues that are supporting young bands down there.
Yeah.
What do you think you can learn from performing in front of an empty room? So 10, 15 people.
Fantastic question. Can I answer this one?
That is a great question.
Yeah, because I have a little anecdote that I have told before.
Okay, but feel free to drop it on me again.
Okay, so for a while I was a uni student just up the road here at Sydney Uni, dreaming about being in a rock and roll band, and they had the Union Theatre. I think it's still there. It was part of Sydney Uni, and they used to have a series of lunchtime concerts, and they were always really poorly attended, unless some folkie like Ross Ryan would turn up, and everyone would be full, but it was the 70s. So there was this weird Kiwi bunch of guys. One was in a ballerina uniform, and one was, and they were called. You know the band?
I think I do.
They were called Mother Goose.
Oh yeah,
no,
I remember them.
You're thinking Split Ends, were you?
I was thinking Split Ends or Crowded House.
No, but from the
I remember Mother Goose.
the same crazy kind of esoteric, art school, 70s thing. Anyway, so Mother Goose. Anyone know this band? Oh, check it out. Yeah. They had a hit called Baked Beans. And,
baked beans. Oh, baked beans.
Yes. It was a bit like Queen, where they did Baked Beans in 4-part harmony,
Fantastic.
Anyway, it was a hit here, and they came over. Well, it wasn't a hit when I was at uni. And so these 5, I think 6 crazy Kiwis did this lunchtime concert. So it was me, another guy eating sandwiches next to me, and a whole bunch of kids aged about 11 or 12 with their teacher. So they obviously thought, oh, this is Mother Goose pantomime.
Oh, no.
So anyway, they all come out and do Baked Beans and the ballerina keyboard player, and, like it's totally psychedelic and a bit depraved. And so the look of horror I remember on the primary school teacher, so they all filed out, leaving me with the guy with the sandwiches. When the guy with the sandwiches had finished his sandwiches, he left. So Mother Goose did their entire hour set to me.
Oh my gosh.
Why do I tell you this? Because when our band started to get going, and there were some pretty shitty crowds as well, I always went, hang on, that band in all their costumes did an hour set. They'd come all the way over from New Zealand to do a round of shows. I will play this gig.
Fantastic. Do they know this story?
Yeah, I think I actually did tell it to the ballerina.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
When I say ballerina, he was a male with hairy legs. Ballerina, They're all men.
See, the real question that is going to bust my brain later is those children that saw the beginning of the show and got filed out. I wonder where they are now. I guarantee
Scarred.
they're Nashville hipsters.
They probably are.
Guarantee
yes.
it.
Nice.
All right, so we have a few Q&As coming in from some of the fans. From Anonymous. Anonymous says...
Sorry, we don't
answer
reply to
from
Anonymous.
We don't Anonymous.
No.
I'm going to call them Bill. Bill says, Midnight Oil has just announced a new album to come this year, your first since 2002. What has it been like being back in the studio with the boys? How instrumental were you in bringing the boys back together?
Okay, so we actually haven't been together this year so far, 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's scattered around the globe.
Bill didn't do his research.
But thanks, Bill, for the question. Yeah, leading up to Christmas, we were all together in the studio in Sydney.
Yep.
And there's a whole bunch of new songs about to be launched in front of an unsuspecting public.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Is it like riding a bike, or do you have to...
It actually is. And speaking of which, we also got the same amazing, born in England, but lives in Toronto, producer, Warren Livesey, to come out as well to produce it, because we admire his work so much, and he's got a great bedside manner and gets great performances out of our band. The other half of the question was, did I have anything to do with getting together? No, it was a mutual kind of thing. I think when our lead vocalist left the political arena and looked around, and there was a band still doing lots of projects. We all have way too many gigs of our own.
Clearly.
Including a marvellous collaboration.
Yeah. Mish from Victoria says, Taylor Swift recently released a documentary called Miss Americana, and it covers her journey into country pop. Do you think that the genre is having a revival with the likes of Casey Musgraves and Carrie Underwood and Billy Ray and Little Nas and stuff like that? So considering that country Old Town Road is one of the biggest songs of the year, do you think that the genre of country is having a new revival?
I wouldn't call it a revival, because I don't feel like it ever went away. I've lived in Nashville for 12 years, and when I first moved there, first of all, I never imagined myself ever living in Nashville, but I got there. I was sent down there by my publisher at the time, and I got down there and I went, oh, this is completely different. I had no idea how amazing it was going to be. It's become the hub of the best songwriters from around the world. It really is. And it's not just about country there. A lot of people think it is, but, you've got bands like Kings of Leon, Paramore, Ben Folds 5 lives there. Justin Timberlake now has a house there. There's so many different writers coming from all around the world to come there and base there and write. So country music has kind of taken a little bit of a left turn. There are still the purists there, and I still love the pure country. But it was cool 12 years ago. There. Like, we arrived and just went, oh, I didn't realize that was country, and I didn't realize that band was country, and that is amazing, and I really love that music. Whereas I think that Australia didn't get a lot of that music up until the last sort of 5 years. It's really changed, and they're getting all this great music, and a lot of people are converting over because they're going, I didn't realize that was country music, but that's what country is these days, and I really love that.
Do you think Taylor Swift is still country music?
I don't think what she wrote on the last couple of records is particularly country, but I think her writing style is country because she's a great storyteller.
Fantastic.
I think she's one of the best songwriters in the world.
Yep.
Whoa.
Wow,
she is.
That's a big call.
Her actual songwriting, if you go back to those early records, those songs are brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, Rob Hirst has a few writing credits. Jeez,
Me and Tay-Tay.
Yeah. But I think she was very brave in that documentary,
Yeah.
She's sort of, been bullied quite a bit, and I think she was very good to stand up, and speak her mind when it wouldn't have been easy.
Definitely.
I also noticed that she came out and spoke reasonably candidly about her battles with anorexia, bulimia, and I thought that was a very brave thing for her to do, seeing as she has so many young women following her. So, yeah, I'm a fan. I really respect what she's done.
Brilliant. Jazz from Adelaide says, what has been the best thing about collaborating with each other, and how did you deal with creative directions? That's an interesting one. Like, when it comes to the dynamic, I'm not sure what O'Shea, what the dynamic there is, but when you're working with Rob, like, how do you give and take,
It's actually really easy. When I collaborate with Mark, we're husband and wife.
Yeah.
So we fight like cat and dog. It's terrible. Like, you know.
Rob can't go to your room.
No, that's right.
I'm your father. You're not wearing that.
So it's a very different dynamic. Mark and I will often get a third writer in when we're writing for our records so that they can play the referee. Yes, so that we just otherwise it basically just descends down into you didn't bloody take the garbage out. You're an idiot. Blah blah blah. You know. So no, this has actually been a really easy, joyful, fun experience because we also didn't put any pressure on it. It wasn't like, oh, we've got to make this incredible album and it's got to be this and it's got to be in this genre and it's got to, we just actually went, let's write some music together. And in the back of my mind, I just thought, even if we write some nice songs together and I get to have that as a keepsake for my girls who are 6 and 8 and they get to grow up and go, oh, here's a CD that Gramps and Mummy did together. That's winning for me, you know? So whatever happens with this music, I'm so happy. Anything's a bonus.
Yeah. And I mean, what do the girls think? Have you played the music?
They love it.
Yeah?
They really love it, because they've had to listen to mixes as they've come in and, so I'm listening to everything on loudspeaker most of the time and they know all the words actually to it. You'll be, when you next see them when you come over, they know a lot of the songs and they love it.
They'll probably pick, impossible harmonies that we didn't even think of out of the air, and stick a few more.
Yeah, just chuck them in there with their tiny little girl voices.
Because, Jay is an extraordinary vocalist. That's the thing. She's multi-talented and worked in lots of areas of music in England, pop rock, blues and folk and now country. But the main thing is she's got this extraordinary set of lungs and birth mother who's an opera singer. That's where it comes down. Certainly didn't inherit my asthmatic bleat. So
I'm sorry, everybody who knows Rob knows that he's singing those, belting out those top harmonies from behind the kit.
Yeah,
that's why I've got an asthmatic bleat now. For 40 years trying to sing over the top of the drum kit.
Yeah, I mean, I will quote Tim Daly when he described your vocals. He said that it was effortlessly beautiful.
Oh, thanks, Tim.
That is an incredible compliment
Tim. Love you.
to send your way.
I'll pay you later.
Now, last question before I do let you go. In the next 12 months, what can we expect from this team, individually and also collectively?
Okay, so we mentioned we might do some gigs, but the interesting thing about doing a few of these radio shows, where you actually have to take just the germ of the song and reduce it to, just a strummy guitar, stomp box, 2 vocal, and maybe an extra instrument, whether that's a cello or piano, whatever, is that then you really find out whether it's a decent song or not.
Yeah.
Because I've got this thing about songs where a great song can be done anyway. You can chop it up and whatever, but if it's just a compelling set of lyrics and it's a great melody and it's got that old grey whistle test factor they used to talk about, then it can be done anyway. So what I'd like to do is, in a room like this, where everyone's just sitting around on couches, preferably with a drink in their hands. Yeah. I know I will. To do a round of songs with all the songs stripped down just to that, because I think actually that actually can be more, because a lot of the songs are quite intimate, that would actually be a more forceful and perhaps a kind of a night that would have more resonance than, getting on the kit and trying to replicate the way you build up an album. Yeah. Which I think you need to, because with repeated listenings, you want to hear all the other musicians and bits and people we've had on. But live, you can actually just, I think, present the song in its simplest form. So I'd like to do that maybe this time next year.
Fantastic. Well, you're the boss. A live performance of Pearl.
Hang on a minute.
Sorry, push your buttons right now.
Right now. Well, next time you come around, I think we'd like to see that performance. And what about for you? What's in the next 12 months for O'Shea?
As I mentioned, we're putting out a record. We have a single at radio at the moment.
Sure.
And are just releasing a new music video. So we're going to probably drop a few singles and then we'll drop the record later this year and come out and tour that. And then, hopefully next year we'll do some shows. And, we're writing all the time. Like, even though we're sort of in between projects or recording or whatever, we write all the time in Nashville. There's and I think you just kind of need to do that to keep your chops up as well. So,
definitely. So
there's always going to be new music and who knows, but we've had a really, really fun week. We've been together all week running around Sydney and talking.
And Melbourne.
and Melbourne. Yeah, and had a really lovely time, really fun time together.
Well, speaking of having fun and having a lovely time, I've had a lovely time.
Yay!
Thank you so much for
Thanks
coming in.
for
It's been an
having us.
absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
Rob and Jay, The Lost and the Found, out February 28. This is Build Series Sydney.